Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a massive development in international commerce, and that is Canada's dramatic suspension of trade negotiations with the United States. We're going to break down the exact breaking points of these talks, focusing specifically on the Canadian perspective. I mean, how does one of the tightest economic relationships on the planet just suddenly hit a brick wall? Let's find out. Let's actually kick things off with this really stark realization from the Canadian government. According to officials, they realized early last year that the whole decades-long era of steadily increasing integration between the US and Canadian economies, that was effectively over. They went into these negotiations fully aware that they were dealing with a fundamentally different American approach to global trade. So they were really under no illusions here.
Part 1, a changing American strategy.
Now, this is a seriously powerful metaphor to help understand how Canada views the current landscape. The Canadian government noted that America just seemed ready to upend all of its commercial relationships. From Canada's point of view, the U.S. was perfectly willing to slap tariffs on its closest allies and literally use economic integration as a weapon. Because of that, Canada felt like the United States' signature on agreements was, well, written in pencil, meaning it could just be erased or changed at any moment, which obviously makes any long-term agreement feel incredibly unreliable.
But hey, despite all those concerns, Canada maintains that the bond between Canadians and Americans is still strong. They really believed a mutually beneficial trade agreement was totally possible. Their goals were straightforward: respect sovereignty, build on complementary strengths, lower the cost of living for families, and create good jobs. And why does this matter to us? Well, because these are the core economic drivers that impact our everyday lives. And Canada asserts they were constantly working toward these goals, even when they felt the American dedication to them was kind of wavering.
Moving on to Part 2, partnership versus transactions.
This comparison brilliantly captures the core philosophical divide at the negotiating table. You've got Canada consistently pushing for long-term, deep-rooted partnerships. But on the flip side, they perceived the American strategy as just a pursuit of short-term, transactional wins. And this isn't just a matter of semantics. One side is looking for enduring, stable ties, while the other is looking for immediate, isolated victories. So, from Canada's perspective, this fundamental difference in strategy basically shifted the whole dynamic from a partnership to a competition. And that gap, it unfortunately just remained way too wide to bridge in recent days. But before we get to the actual breakdown, let's look at what was realistically on the table.
Part 3, what Canada offered. According to their statements, Canada actually put some very specific offers on the table in good faith. Take retail, for example. They were willing to encourage the provinces to put U.S. alcohol back on store shelves. And when it came to the highly debated supply management sector, they offered up administrative protections. But it's worth noting, they offered that without actually changing the core system, the U.S. quotas, or the applied tariffs. They felt these were pragmatic, reasonable steps toward a fair deal.
But probably the biggest offer was regarding strategic sectors. Canada was willing to drop their remaining retaliatory tariffs on 3 absolutely vital industries: steel, aluminum, and autos. But here is the catch, right? They would only drop these tariffs if the United States substantially lowered theirs to a level that actually made it economic for Canadian companies to export to the US again. They just wanted a level playing field.
Which brings us to Part 4, the uncrossable red lines.
So where did it all fall apart? Well, in the final days of the talks, the US threw out some new terms, and Canada flat out rejected them. They used 3 very specific words to describe these new demands: uneconomic, unfair, and undermined. They argued that these terms completely wiped out the net benefits for Canada and really called into question the reliability of any deal they might sign. Basically, from the Canadian perspective, the Americans were just asking for way too much while offering way too little. The Canadian government made it crystal clear that there were just some things they absolutely would not do. They stated they weren't going to compromise Canada's sovereignty, and they certainly weren't going to undermine their key domestic industries. The cumulative effect of all these U.S. demands, at least according to Canada, really revealed the strict limits of America's commitment to a true economic partnership. Essentially, Canada felt they were being pushed right past their ultimate red lines.
And that leads us directly into Part 5, walking away from negotiations.
Check out how shockingly fast this all unraveled. For over a year, Canada says they were grinding away, negotiating patiently and in good faith. I mean, even just a few weeks ago, they reported making important progress. But then, in just a matter of days, the U.S. drops those new, uneconomic terms. Talk about whiplash, right? It went from steadily moving toward a deal straight to a total suspension of talks by last evening.
This definitive statement right here perfectly sums up Canada's final stance. With the gap just being too wide, the Canadian government directed their negotiators to pack up their bags and head back to Ottawa immediately. They concluded, simply, we cannot accept what they've offered and we will not give what they've asked. So, as we wrap up this explainer, we are left staring at a pretty massive question. The Canadian perspective highlights this real fear that economic integration is increasingly just being used as a weapon. If two of the closest historical allies and trading partners on the entire planet can't find common ground without talks collapsing into suspended negotiations and tariff standoffs, what exactly is the future stability of global commerce? It's a huge question that businesses, workers, and families are all going to be grappling with as this unprecedented trade standoff continues to unfold.